Can probiotics help SIBO? And frustratingly, admittedly, there is still debate here, even though we have ample evidence to answer this question. But let's look at Jan's question and then also really examine both sides of the data on this argument and then let you make up your mind. So Jan's question, I have IBS and I have just also been recently diagnosed with SIBO. I don't want the probiotics to fuel the SIBO in my gut. Should I avoid probiotics because of my SIBO diagnosis? This is a great question. So we'll break this down into a few different lines of thinking. There's really mechanistic thinking in terms of what's going on underlying SIBO. And then there's also clinical trial outcome data. This is much more important, but we'll look at both. One point here is that there is lack of agreement in terms of what probiotic is the best probiotic for SIBO. Now, there's different ways that we can interpret that. You could say, as I do, there are many, many clinical trials, even meta-analyses, as we discussed a moment ago, that find that probiotics can help with IBS and with SIBO. However, they use different formulas. I look at that as, great, this means different formulas can all be helpful for SIBO. Others may say, well, no, until we know what the best probiotic is, we shouldn't be recommending probiotics. I hear that argument. I don't think it's a great argument because probiotics are not expensive and they're not invasive. Now, if this was a very expensive and very invasive intervention, then yes, we may need to have a high degree of specificity with the recommendation in case it could harm someone. But at very worst, probiotics may cause some temporary discomfort and you stop and that goes away. So the very rare, but sometimes reported side effects from probiotics will go away almost immediately, yet there is a really large upside. But I hear the argument. I don't think it's a good argument, and it's really letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. The other point here is what I want to unpack in a bit more detail. There is this fairly pervasive canard that probiotics can worsen SIBO by colonizing the small intestine and increasing gas production. So argument point number one, probiotics worsen SIBO. And there's two studies here that are often referenced. The first one here by Satish Rao, who's been on the podcast, I believe, twice today. Really appreciate Satish and his work and generally agree with his approach. But this is one study that I really did not agree with. And here's the summary. Those who had SIBO and brain fog were all assessed, and they found that there was a significant amount of people who had SIBO and brain fog who were also taking probiotics and or consuming yogurt. So essentially they found a group of people, again, who had SIBO and brain fog, and they noted that a fair subset of these people, a significant subset, were taking probiotics and or eating yogurt. So this is just observation. Then the intervention was stopping probiotics and starting antibiotics. Their brain fog and their SIBO improved. The author's conclusion was the use of prolonged or excessive probiotics and or cultured yogurt further contributed to the small intestinal colonization by lactobacilli and other bacteria. Okay, there's a few obvious problems here, and if you're a science geek, that these should pop right out to you. But conflating cause and effect, because people walked in using probiotics or eating yogurt, does not mean it was the cause. That's like saying people who go on diets are overweight because of the diets. It could very well be that people who are on diets or maybe using diet sodas are using those things because they're trying to lose weight. So this conflation or this hypothesis is akin to the conflation of saying that those who drink diet soda are overweight because of the diet soda. And like I'm noting here, those with SIBO and IBS are probably more likely to use these things that can help with those symptoms, yogurt because of the probiotics or probiotic supplementation. And the most striking error here, which really surprised me, Satish, with all due respect, the improvement after taking antibiotics does not mean that the observation of taking probiotics prior was causal in the SIBO. What the study did find was that people who had SIBO and brain fog, who were then treated with antibiotics, saw improvements in their SIBO and their brain fog. It's very different than saying probiotics caused SIBO and brain fog. And why this is upsetting, as I'll share in a moment here, is because of the clinical trials showing that probiotics can actually eradicate SIBO. But, this is one of the data points that's often cited. I see it, and I have done an extensive review on this paper in our clinician's newsletter. It's interesting, and I appreciate the thinking, but there's a lot of inferential hypothesis here, and I think that is something that can really get us into trouble. We have to be careful with. The second study that's often cited looked at 19 healthy individuals, and they performed pre-post SIBO breath tests after being given probiotics. And the details here matter. Probiotics did lead to higher methane gas in 3 of 19 people. There was no change in hydrogen, and there was no change in symptoms. So this is one data point. And as you've probably heard me say in the past, in any body of literature, we can find a data point that suggests whatever we want to believe, right? Whatever side of the argument you fall on, you can find a data point to support that. What's important is that you don't cherry pick. Definitionally, this is what cherry picking is. And you look at the totality of the data. So enter meta-analyses.